Good morning. I don't know if we've got everybody here and seated, but let's get going. Wonderful. Good. I understand we have a public speaker, Mr. Rushinoff.
Good morning. I'm Gene Rushinoff with the Strap Hangers campaign. I wanted to start by acknowledging the restorations that were made to some of the bus routes. I think they took into account the fact that people have hills to climb and accessible connections to make. But the reality is that 100% of the bus cuts are still going, 100% of the subway cuts are still going ahead, and 90% of the bus cuts, and they remain the worst cuts I've seen in my career as a transit advocate. So as we've done throughout the process, we've been collecting testimony from people who are affected by the cuts that are still out there. I'm going to read a couple of their statements submitted to us. One's from Dorothea of Staten Island. I'm a 54-year-old single mother who regularly takes the X6 to work. It will now take twice as long for me to get into work in the morning. I can only cringe at how much longer it will take for me to get home at night. As it is, I get home at 7:30. I might as well move to Pennsylvania. Sonia of Queens. I'm a student on the Queens College that relies on the Q74 to get access to the E-train to get home. Having the Q74 cut will make my commute much longer, as it already takes me an hour to get home. Think about how your cuts are affecting the everyday people who rely on you. Steve of Brooklyn. Please don't discontinue the B71 bus service. This is the only bus on my street, Eastern Parkway, and it is the only one for my neighbors and me, including the elderly, disabled, and school children. So we can easily get to Park Slope. In other areas, we have to shop, work, and go to school. While ridership on this line may be low, it is a key lifeline for many in the neighborhood. It is also a critical line for many Brooklynites wishing to visit the Brooklyn Museum, Public Library, and Botanic Garden. Please do not eliminate this route. And then lastly, a favorite of mine, Jose of the Bronx. As the City Council and the Strap Hangers propose, use $121 billion in available federal stimulus funds and $50 million in operating funds that the MTA has budgeted to pay for its capital programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gene. The minutes. In approving the minutes from last month, I also want to note that you'll also be approving an amendment to the January minutes. Do I have a motion? Second? All in favor? Thank you. Any changes to the committee work plan this month? Hearing none? It's all yours.
New York City Transit, that's Carmen Bianco. Carmen comes back to New York City Transit after having served here 5 years in the past. He's got an extensive safety background working in public transportation and both at Amtrak as well as New Jersey Transit in the safety area as well as operations. So he's someone who comes pretty well acquainted with the complexities of the system we have to operate. And I'm looking forward to working with him as we take on the challenges of not only trying to bring technology into an organization at a faster pace, and not just technology for the sake of technology, but for the sake of improved efficiencies and customer service issues, but at a time when we have some very, very difficult financial issues to deal with as well. So welcome, Carmen.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. I just would like to start with a few words. And first of all, I'm absolutely thrilled and honored to be here and be part of the New York City Transit team. This opportunity really means a lot to me. And I have a very deep sense of obligation for our customers and for our employees. And for me, the obligation goes well beyond the individuals themselves, but really extends out through their families, that when they're on our property, we've got to ensure that their journey is safe, that it's reliable and on time. I also want to make sure that I state that I fully endorse the Chairman's vision, and I will work hard, as well as my staff will work hard, to ensure that we step up and that we carry out that mission. In my role, as far as the Department of Subways are concerned, we need to remain customer-focused. We need to ensure that the appearance of our stations and the conditions continue to improve, that we keep an eye on the efficiency of the operation, the state of the infrastructure, and equally important, focus on our employees, the people that actually make the system operate 24 hours a day. I could tell you when I was here 14 years ago, one of my takeaways was just the power of the people that work in New York City Transit. I found them to be very smart, very dedicated group of people, and having been back only 3 weeks now, it's hit me again that this organization is chock full of individuals that are smart and energetic and dedicated to the cause and the mission. And that became very evident for me 2 weekends ago when we had that major rainstorm with the 5 inches of rain and the 60 to 70 mile an hour winds. We had employees and leaders all over this city keeping our service moving. And for me, it was my first opportunity to see the organization in action, and they did a great job. And I was very proud to be part of that. So we will listen to the feedback from our customers. We will listen to the feedback of our board members, and we will bring the chairman's mission and vision alive. So thank you. I look forward to working with you. I look forward to providing you progress reports on improvements that we're making, and thank you for your support.
Carmen, we're very grateful that you're here, especially since this is such a perilous time, really, in the history of the transit system with all of these funding cuts. You have a Herculean job. This committee will be as supportive as we possibly can of you and staff. Thank you for joining us.
No, sir. Only wish.
Quick question. There have been 3 or 4 places that habitually flood when we have really heavy rains, and there's been flood amelioration measures taking place at Park Avenue South, Upper Broadway, and Hillside Avenue. Where was it a problem still in this heavy rain that we had a couple of weekends ago?
We had some flooding East 140th Street, I believe.
The yard at 149th Street.
The yard at 149th Street and down at West 4th, but by and large, the wind was much more of an issue for us this time around.
I wouldn't be surprised if you remember in '93 we had that really bad December storm, and 6 months later the National Weather Service forecast said they misdiagnosed that it was really a hurricane. We had sustained winds up over 60, 70 miles an hour, and the majority of the problems, almost all the systems experienced, were down power lines, down trees blocking the right-of-way, and we lost a significant portion of basically power lines that carry high-voltage power lines for Con Ed across the flats in Jamaica Bay, the Rockaways. So that was where the majority of the service interruptions were.
You're welcome.
Regardless of the fact that we didn't do much flooding, that the flooding was somewhat contained, I think it's important to recognize that we made a number of really small appearing changes to help identify areas that did flood, and I think some of those areas have worked. For example, at the, Chambers 23123, raising the gratings. Not only do they look nice, but it didn't flood. And I think we have made some changes that have had a really good influence. Nonetheless, that's not to take away from the yeoman job that was done by keeping as much going as we could. You did a really great job.
Yeah, the Hillside was always a historical problem area in Lower Manhattan. Although the true test will come when we get our next 3 to 4 inch rainstorm inside of 2 hours. That generally is when you get the system gets tested the most.
I could tell you, I guess as a result of past experience, the Department of Subways has a flood plan, and that plan was put into effect a few days before the actual storm hit, and we were ready. The folks were ready around the city to make sure that we made service. So it absolutely worked. Thank you.
Operations report now.
Oh, okay. For Subway's weekday on-time performance results for January 2010 were as follows. Absolute on-time performance was 77.8% system-wide. That's down 3% from 80.2% in 2009. The A division was 82.2%, while the B division was at 74.6%. Controllable on-time performance was 92.3% system-wide, up 5.3% from 87.6% in 2009. The A division was at 93.6%, while the B division was at 91.3%. There is a disparity that you could see in the report when you look at absolute versus controllable on-time performance as it relates to the B and the Q. and A service. The B and the Q was really the result of the Brighton line work, and the A train was a result of missing stations in the Rockaways, also work related. So that was the background there. There were also 34,139 weekday delays in January. Turning to the weekends, on-time performance results in January were as follows. Absolute on-time performance was 44% system-wide, down 30% from 62.9% in December. Controllable on-time performance was 87.4% system-wide, up 1.6% from 85.9% in December. The upward trend in subway weight assessment results continued in January. System-wide weight assessment was 89.7% in January, up 1.1% from last year. Both the A and B divisions showed increases. For the 12-month average, weight assessment was 89% system-wide, an improvement of 2.6% from a year ago. Again, performance increased for both the A and B divisions. The upward trend also continued for subway MDBF, mean distance between failure, which was 179,692 miles in January, an increase of 35.8% from 132,340 last year. The 12-month average MDBF now stands at 157,233 miles, up 17.7% from the 133,546 a year ago. That concludes my report.
Joe Smith, buses.
Good morning. On the bus side, weekday pull-out performance was 99.6% or better for the AM and PM peaks for both January and the 12-month average. Completed trips averaged 99.3 for January and 99.1 for the last 12 months. MDBF was 43.48 in January, an increase of 10% from 39.51 last year. The 12-month average, 39.51, was up slightly under 1% from 39.16 a year ago. Paratransit completed trips were up 16.5% in January compared to last year. For the last 12 months, completed trips were up 16.8% compared to the prior 12-month period. The favorable trend regarding passenger no-shows continued. During the month of January, there were 19,566 no-shows, down 21.1% from last year. As a percentage of scheduled trips, passenger no-shows were 3.36%, down 30.8% a year ago. I just want to also mention that during the storm, there literally was nobody that wasn't calling me looking for buses one way or another. And my people really did an absolute fabulous job between the railroad, Metro North, everybody. There was something going on everywhere. And where we normally did bus service, like Hamilton Beach, where Tom was mentioning before, there was poles down everywhere you could imagine. It was simply unbelievable, that windstorm over there. And we run a line over there MTA Bus runs a line over there. And we had shuttles going over to Verrazano. We had shuttles going to Cold Spring Harbor. We had shuttles going up for Metro North. We had shuttles from Hicksville to Huntington. All of this was just put together at a moment's notice, and they really, really did a good job. And I also want to thank Commissioner Banks for helping me. We lost electricity at Eastchester Depot, and that was restored, I believe, on Thursday morning, and I thank you for your help. That concludes my report.
Joe, is there an increase in absenteeism among any of the drivers on those rainy days? Were there any folks that decided not to show up for work, or was it about normal?
That Saturday and Sunday we had an increase of no-shows. People were claiming they lost electricity at their houses, or they couldn't get to work due to the fact that roads were closed and things of that nature. So Saturday night into Sunday, but luckily there was hardly any ridership out there on Saturday night and Sunday. People were smart and they stayed home due to the bad weather.
You can now understand why it's essential on the board to have a representative from Con Ed. The strap hangers, the riders, councils, all those other people are not really essential. Con Ed should be a permanent board member instead of those guys.
Finally, some kind words about Con Ed.
Joe, they're calling you for buses. Imagine how they're going to call you for buses after the cuts.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Owen?
Acting Chief Monahan.
Good morning. I am Deputy Chief Owen Monahan, Executive Officer of the Transit Bureau. And for the month of February, we experienced a reduction in all areas of major felonies, totaling a 7.6% reduction. The months of January and February, we experienced a 12.2% reduction, although we were up 2% in the area of robbery, which was because of a citywide pattern that we experienced in January, which involved 11 newsstand robberies, which resulted in an arrest of an individual. And in the area of burglary, we were up 2. One was a booth burglary, and the other one was a newsstand burglary, of which one also resulted in arrest. Thank you.
Cheryl?
Well, Chief Monahan, we welcome you. We've heard a lot about you, and we're happy that you're here.
Thank you, sir.
I have two things to say to you. One, because Chief Cole was promoted to Chief of Patrol, there is promotion possible after this job. So it's not the dead end that everybody used to think it was. So don't give up. And secondly, we have said before that the crime statistics being at an all-time low, you have commenced at perfection, but we expect you to continue to improve.
Thank you, sir. We will.
Good.
Cheryl, safety report?
Performance indicators were mixed on the subway side. The customer accident and injury rates decreased by 8.7% and 9% in December. However, the 12-month averages both increased 3.5% compared to a year ago. The 12-month increase was primarily due to 2 high months in the beginning of 2009. The 12-month total confirmed fires in the subway system decreased by 13.6%. The results were mixed on the bus side. The bus customer accident rate increased by 11.2% through December. The bus customer accident rate decreased through December by 3.3%, and the 12-month average is down 5.3% from a year ago. The bus collision injury rate decreased in December by 26.3%. And finally, the employee lost time accident rate was 39.5% lower in January as compared to 2009. Although there have been an improvement over the last few months, the 12-month average remains 11.9% higher than a year ago. Thank you.
Finance. Preliminary January fare box revenue was $254.1 million, $500,000 below budget. The average non-student fare in January 2010 was $1.47. In constant 1996 dollars, the average fare fell from $1.39 in 1996 to $1.03 in 2010. Non-reimbursable expenses before depreciation were under budget by $8 million in January, due mostly to lower power prices. Ridership in January, ridership totaled 180.7 million, which is virtually equal to the budget projections. Average weekday subway ridership in January was 4.9 million, an increase of 0.7% from 2009 due to the low ridership of January 2nd. Excluding that day, ridership decreased 0.3%. That was January 2nd, 2009. Average weekday local bus ridership in January was 2.2 million, a decrease of 0.6% from 2009. Excluding January 2nd, 2009, ridership decreased 1.8%. January 2010 average weekday paratransit ridership increased by 18.8% from 2009. Preliminary financial results for February 2010. Total fare box revenue was $239.6 million. $7 million or 2.9% below budget, mostly due to lower ridership resulting from multiple snowstorms. Preliminary budget operating expenses before depreciation were under budget by $14.6 million, due mostly to the favorable timing of expenses and lower power prices. Capital program, Fred Smith.
Looking to capital for the month of January, Transit committed a total of $20.1 million. That included construction awards and 4 new design starts. That completes my report.
Do we have any questions on the operating report? Just maybe one comment. As we cut some of these bus routes, which is going to force people onto the subway system, particularly lines like the 7, which are already overcrowded. I hope we're going to be doing everything in our power to make the customer experience less dreadful than it otherwise could be. We want to move on to procurements.
The procurement agenda this month includes 18 actions in the book totaling $85.5 million expenditures. I ask for your approval on all 18 actions of the agenda. Steve Plachaki is here to represent procurement. Stanley Grill has left the New York City Transit Authority to accept a job in the private sector after 25 years service with New York City Transit. He retired and took another job. Stanley Grill. Yes, it was a loss, tremendous loss for us, but it's a very good opportunity for him.
Could I have a motion, and then we'll, any questions on any of the items in here? Some of those on the previous committee will have seen the MTA CC items. Any questions? Could I have a vote? All in favor of moving to the board? Any opposed? Procurement items move.
An action item, we're seeking the committee's approval of an action to amend the board committee charter and to formally adopt it for use. I think that was separate, provided under separate cover.
It appears in the book, I believe, on page 126 through 132. I actually have a comment. As you know, the bus committee is going to be moving into a separate committee, which I think is actually a pretty smart idea. Although I will be very, very sorry to lose my almost daily working relationship with Joe and his team, who are fantastic. The way it was worded, I found a little bit objectionable. I think it said that we were creating this committee to increase focus and efficiency. I have never felt that this group lacked focus or efficiency, and I propose that the wording be changed to represent what is really going on, which is the consolidation of bus under one separate committee, which is a sensible move. So I'd like to suggest a language change. I don't know whether it should be done in this committee or another one, but
we can certainly take that forward. And I think the intent is to the efficiencies that could be seen by a consolidation of operations, planning, and maintenance across all three agencies. And your point's well taken.
I move that the charter revision amendments be adopted as amended by the statement just made by the chair, Ms. Russell.
any opposed?
The first item under service changes are what we call our normal, at this time of year, service changes that can be taken on our action without going through a hearing process. We're notifying the committee, this is a notification item, of bus schedule changes that will be planned for implementation with the summer pick in 2010. These changes will affect 21 routes and include adjustments based on ridership demand due to the fact that schools will be out of session through the board-adopted guidelines and are based on revised running times that actually reflect different traffic conditions. So these are the standard types of service changes we do at this time of year. We brought forward similar ones in December, talking about changes that would go in effect in January. These are not the ones that have been subject of the public hearing process that we've all just gone through.
Anyone have any questions or comments? Are we going to talk about? Okay,
Yes.
that's next.
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's just notification.
We are duly notified.
Thank you. Much to the same degree as Gene Rushinoff stated, what we're talking about now are the service cuts that are an order of magnitude nowhere near anything I've seen in my 35 years, no matter where I worked, whether it be Chicago, Vancouver, or here. But they're actions that we believe are necessary in order to resolve the budget gap issues that we have. Peter's going to go through those, but we had presented a few months back to the committee and to the board a series of recommended service changes that would generate some $77.6 million in operational savings across both subways and buses. And that was the start of a process through which there was public hearings in the boroughs, and there was ongoing dialogue between interested stakeholders, elected officials, and operations planning staff. And as a result of not only that ongoing dialogue, but the information we received at the public hearings talking about the different impacts that the proposed reductions were going to have on people, the staff went back and took a look at each one of those comments, each one of those reductions, and reapplied the application of the criteria that they used before, but factoring in the different information, the additional information we got from people in terms of impacts that these changes would have on them. Because make no mistake about it, even ones that we are not restoring are going to impact people very, very significantly. The ones that we're restoring are ones that are at the very top end of that scale, and we felt that there was nothing other to do than to restore them. And the restorations were done on the merits of that criteria that were established early on in terms of need, availability of alternate services, and the ability for a particular service to serve a network issue in terms of if you remove that service, did that take out a critical leg of a service pattern somebody needed. So at the end of that process, we ended up with basically restoring a little bit between $5 and $6 million worth of cuts that had originally been proposed as part of the $77.6 million package. And Peter can quickly go through that so you have a feel for what the logic was and how it was done. But these are truly being restored because of the unique impacts and needs of the people that would have been affected had we gone forward with them. Peter?
Thank you. If I could just very briefly describe the changes that Tom mentioned in the bus side. They break down into really 2 or 3 categories. The first one were 3 routes where the service is really essential because of large hill changes in terms of elevation for riders. So while the horizontal distance is not so great, getting out of those particular neighborhoods is a challenge. In the Bronx, the BX-18, which serves the bluffs along the Harlem River, and 2 in Staten Island, the S-42 and the S-60. In the case of the Staten Island routes, we were able to restore part of the service either by rerouting other buses or rush hours and evening service on the S-42. The S-60 change of a reroute was actually suggested at the public hearing. In addition, we looked at areas where the neighborhoods without the bus service would be more isolated and a little more distant than other areas in the city. In the case of the Bronx, the BX-33 on weekends, which connects the South Bronx to Harlem and has no real other alternatives except some roundabout ways. The M22 in Manhattan from Battery Park City heading across the island. The B4 in Brooklyn, serving the area along Sheepshead Bay, south of the Belt Parkway, which we're proposing to restore on rush hours during rush hour periods. The Q42 in southeast Queens, also a rush hour restoration in an area isolated by the Long Island Railroad tracks. And then finally, there were 2 changes proposed for accessibility. In Brooklyn, the B13, which is an accessible link from Wyckoff Hospital to the Myrtle-Wyckoff Transit Station. That portion we are proposing to retain. And in the Bronx, the BX8, which is the whole country club, service changes. It will provide the new service to that neighborhood, but we will continue to serve the Pelham Bay Park Station, which is an accessible station and a center of the community. And then lastly, on the subway side, the only change to our proposal is we had proposed and continue to propose combining the V and the M trains. Our original plan had called that route the V, but from input from the community in Ridgewood, Queens, we're going to call it the M train instead.
And the real issue there is it's been a long-standing history in terms of the M. It's decades use versus the V is less than 10 years. And in terms of customer awareness of what the service is, there's probably a better identification of the M than there is with the V.
Just before you start, Mark, I want to make sure we are not taking a vote on the service cuts at this committee. That vote will be taken at the Finance Committee. But I would like there to be as robust a discussion of this terrible subject as all of us would like to have at this committee meeting. Mark?
The public meetings law doesn't specifically require the staff to be present at the public meetings. However, you sat through every meeting, and that really was an enormous help. Now, everybody on this committee really performed wonderfully, but you guys really went out of your way to attend and to assist. And while they were yelling at the board members, sometimes by name, it was really you who were listening to the responsible people who came and said, don't cut out this bus line for this reason, or combine it with this one, or shift it there, and maybe even sometimes you'll save more money. And that's, your presence made, I think, a lot of people speak who were responsible, who could see what the budget problems were, and were really trying to work with you and to come up with even more constructive proposals. So the fact that you were there, I think, was an enormous help. And the fact that everybody on this committee, because the buses and subways are taking the brunt, of course, of these service cuts, were, as always, that's right, what everybody put up with was really quite remarkable for this board and this committee to do it. It was just wonderful to see it. And I know that some of us get frustrated when there's testimony from state officials who say you can't do that, you can't do this, and you can't do this. And it's their fault because they are cutting back the money, as well as proposing and presenting a series of pretty silly taxes, which never seem to come up to their potential. So the staff really did a wonderful job during these hearings, and my hat is off to all you unpaid board members who went through all that and sat through these meetings and took, with extreme patience, a lot of direct and indirect abuse.
That's because they couldn't pronounce Tom's last name.
But it was really the MTA working at its best, I thought, and I think that the staff and all of the committee members should be congratulated for surviving this process.
Thank you, including the fights in Brooklyn. I saw Lois on television. She looked like she was trying to break that one up. I was getting nervous for her.
Well, in response to the board member's comment, Peter actually on a couple nights made 2 hearings, would run to one and come back to another. He had staff at every one of the hearings taking notes, and to their credit, even if the idea in terms of a service change didn't generate within his staff, if it made sense, it was implemented. And I think I think in the S60, that was somebody else's idea. Was it the S60? So at the end of the day, we truly are interested in trying to minimize the impacts to people. And it was, however painful, it was a good process in the sense we did get some good input.
Susan.
You know, I wish we could restore more. The budget issue is way beyond anything we can deal with without making service cuts. But the thing that makes me feel a little bit good about this is that you did listen and you did restore what could be restored, and I think you did so in a very judicious manner. And it was the right thing to do. So I only hope we can go forward and continue to do the right thing as much as possible. So thank you all.
I have a technical question on the B8. It's going northbound to Pelham Bay Park. That was the change. But when it makes the return trip, is it veering off Westchester Avenue down Middletown, or is it continuing up to Pelham Bay Park?
Both directions. Both directions would go via Pelham Bay Park. That adds a little bit of time to the route, and that's why there's an expense. And for the riders who are going through, it'll be a little longer, but existing BA riders will now have the advantage of going to Pelham Bay Park as well.
Andrew.
Now that everyone has congratulated everybody on how well they did at the hearings, there's just no way to put this in any other light, but this is a terrible, terrible, disastrous thing for our customers and for us in a lot of ways. The fact that there's no hope of changing these because there's no hope of any bailout in any way, I don't know why we're not looking at alternatives, except that I've heard the chairman say he doesn't want a fare hike this year. That would do away with some of these, and then the legislature could see fit to act if they chose to. Commissioner Seabrook had a suggestion which hasn't made its way anywhere, which was to add a small tax on gasoline, which nobody would feel. The gasoline actually fluctuated by 12 cents or 16 cents, it said in the paper last week. Almost nobody felt it. You know, once again, we should be revisiting tolling the free bridges, which would equalize traffic on them. It would be good for motorists as well as transit users. Transit riders have to pay to cross the Harlem River. Why should motorists get a free ride in this era of green? None of this stuff is being discussed. All we're talking about is taking away vital services from people, and I don't know how you can address this in any other way. This is not a good thing. And, Tom, not to dispute you, but if in fact these were chosen because there are alternatives, how come the Q76 isn't back? There's no alternative to the Q76, anywhere near the Q76. So if we're really taking things where there's an alternatives, that one would be back. The M8 would be back. I mean, there's just things that should be back that aren't back. I'll have more to say at another time. Oh, I'll say something else now. The worst thing, and which I think nobody here can even calculate, is the change from 100 to 125% of seated load in the off-peak. I mean, that minute or two extra wait that you think everybody's going to wait, all you have to do is look at today's on-time performance at transit in the transit book to know that this is anything but clockwork, and that those 1 or 2 minutes is easily going to balloon into 8 or 10 minutes additional wait. And anybody that doesn't believe that is kidding themselves. These things don't run like clockwork, except perhaps in the middle of the night, or on the Franklin Shuttle, which has a 99-point-some-odd on-time performance. So, you know, what we're saying to people, you only have a short wait, is not going to be the case. And that's all. And, you know, this is the most important thing to the city, that the city is not trying to come up with an alternative to this. But yeah. One last thing. I keep saying that, don't I? I'm a little emotional about this. We have been told at previous meetings that express bus service is the most expensive thing that we run. That being the case, why are we not restoring more local buses and taking away some more express buses? Those are a luxury in many ways. I don't understand that one.
It depends on where you live, and in the borough of Staten Island, where they do not have direct access to the subway system, and their dependency on the express bus service is far greater than others, and it is a lifeline in for them. So at the end of the day, as I said at the start of this process, I started my career in operations planning. And what you come to learn about it is not a science, it's not an art, it's a combination of two. And as much as you would like to surgically apply the criteria, we would like to surgically apply the criteria we have. It's surgically applied, but in an art and science manner, not just following a formula.
Jeff.
Certainly there'll be more to say at the Finance Committee when we're discussing the budget and our overall alternatives. But I guess I did want to comment on what Commissioner Albert said, which is there are many other things we can be and should be doing. It's sort of clear to me that for the last 3 years, this board has been asking Albany to step up and, in fact, provide new revenue sources, whether it's congestion pricing, tolls, payroll tax, or whatever all the sort of gasoline tax, cigarette tax, whatever possibly thing the board has done and has asked. You've seen different endings to all of those requests, and it's clear to me at this point the MTA is being asked to fend for itself, and that leaves us with very few options. So it's not that we have not asked. I think we have asked for the last 2 or 3 years in a row, and I'm not so sure what's going to change. So with that said, I think the MTA does have to get and make some very, very difficult choices, and those are not things to be sneezed at, and we need to do a delicate balance. And I think some of that balance is looking at service in areas where other service options are provided, and that was one of the most telling things. And I am not going to sit here and congratulate that we picked the right restorations, but it is worth noting that in some of these cases with the cuts are not necessarily an elimination of a transit option. In some cases, you're just rerouting an existing bus, so it takes a little bit longer. I'm not looking to minimize that, but I'm pointing out that when you eliminate a bus line, when people talk about you're eliminating my line on, say, 3rd Avenue or this, you know, in Brooklyn or elsewhere, there's going to still be a service there. And that's important for us to realize that what we're doing is making changes and cuts to run more efficiently without taking people away from mass transit. I think there's always a balance. One balance is better than the other. But it's important when we have this conversation about service cuts, these are real cuts for people. But let's look at the 90%, or I'd love to get the number, of services that we actually capped. And we're still running those services on time as of now at the same fare. well,
see the
there's
book
some
this
changes
morning?
in the subways, but my point being, there's still that service there, and we focus so much on the 1,000 people or the 200 people on this line versus this bus that now will have to wait an extra 10 minutes or a 5-minute walk or whatever the alternatives are. They're real, but we forget about all the other services that we continue to provide, and we have to provide. And those are, unfortunately, our choices.
Norman.
You know, I've consistently not supported the cutting of any services. Subway, buses, doesn't matter. Paratransit, doesn't matter. I watched yesterday, so did a lot of us, or early this morning, 216 or so individuals pass health care in the entire country for the American people. And I can't fathom for the life of me why 16 of us or 20 of us can't get this together when they could spend trillions of dollars on health care. We can't get this train on the right track. By cutting a service or rerouting a service, if you will, I've asked so many times on different in different arenas of when are we going to think outside the box and sell 161st Street to Yankee Stadium and have them pay us revenues to plaster the station with baseball stuff, you know? When are we going to sell 42nd Street to Disney and say, you know what, we're going to maintain it, but go ahead, decorate it, do whatever it is you want to do to it, we'll maintain it, but you're going to pay us for it. You know, we talk about the people in Albany, and rightfully so, because they come and they stand before us and they make these speeches and they make these promises and nothing's getting done. When are we going to say, you know what, if they want to give us the ball to do it, when are we going to take the ball and really do it? And say, you know what, you're not helping us, so we have to fend for ourselves, like the commissioner said. Since we have to fend for ourselves, then let's fend for ourselves. Let's sit one day in a meeting and say, you know what, in an executive session or whatever, we're going to do this for Disney, we're going to do this for Verizon, we're going to wrap subway cars, we're going to increase revenue, we're going to get the money that's necessary so that we can keep the people of this city moving safely, reliably, on time, the way that it's supposed to be done. Now, I know it's none of your faults. Nobody wants to take layoffs. Somebody's going to take a hit here, and it's going to be a major hit. And when you start hitting, it doesn't come back. So we've got to do some things to go forward. Now, I know this is not we're not taking any votes on this or anything else, but just keep in mind, 216 people changed history in the United States last night. And we, in this room, can't seem to get this train on the track. I have a problem with that. Thank you.
You know, I don't want to debate you because I agree that these service cuts are heinous. I never imagined that I would come on this board only to degrade service. But your example of the Yankees wasn't a great one because, remember, they tried to get us to pay them to put the word Yankees on the wall of that station. I was so angry.
You should allow me to negotiate with the
Yankees.
Yankees.
You know, that might be a great idea because I took my Yankees cap and threw it in a bottom drawer and haven't worn it since after that little episode. And we did try wrapping subway cars until the police told us, can't do that because we can't see in the windows of the cars to see if there's anything going on that shouldn't be going on. We have to revisit these ideas. Our backs are against the wall. I agree with you 1,000%. I don't think anything should be taken for granted anymore when we're being faced with putting our strap hangers through what we're asking them to go through.
Commissioner Fresca, I agree with you. So if they can't see in the cars, we take the windows and we put the little eye like the Geico, and they can look right inside, and we'll be fine with that.
There's plenty of stuff.
Your creativity,
right, Chief?
You got to be able to look through the windows.
Are there any additional comments? I will be seeing some of you in finance when we get to vote on this.
One
Andrew,
last thing,
yes.
though. I don't know if it's the purview of this particular thing. Is the booth agent cuts the purview of this committee?
The booth agent cuts were taken last year. The only issue we're doing right now is actually, instead of attriting them out, we're laying them off. But I mean, the booth agent cuts were taken in 2009.
Well, we're talking about an additional 500 locations, are we not? From what I heard?
They're from last year. Yeah, everything we're doing in terms of token booth clerks and agents are done for actions taken last year in 2009.
Moving it up?
No. The cuts were taken last year in the budget process.
But it's actually going to go into effect in 10.
That's correct.
Okay, well, if you saw today's paper, you saw that somebody who was swiping people in was committing some crimes. I mean, this is just going to get a lot worse. I don't know how anybody would want their name associated with removing the eyes and ears of, and I'm no shill for the union, but I have to tell you, a lot of people are going to be afraid to go down there. I mean, it might be a good idea to have the pepper spray concession at one of these stations because you are on your own. We were told last year when these were voted by Mike Schuback, don't worry, by the time these go into effect, we'll have intercoms and cameras in effect to watch. We don't have those things. So I don't know how anybody in good conscience can allow that to go forward before you have those things in place. At least there's something to protect people then. As worthless as you might think the booth agents are, they certainly can pick up the phone and call the police and broadcast a description to somebody if there's a problem. Now people are going through the turnstiles with impunity. I see it every day. And you've seen the figures for fare evasion going up. That fare evasion could have saved a lot of this service.
I have a different related comment on that. If we are laying these folks off, then the impacts of the arbitration settlement perhaps are not as profound as we thought they were. And at some point, I think I'd like to get a financial reckoning of how much money these layoffs versus attriting are actually saving us in the 4% increases that some of these folks were supposed to be getting, because they're all TWU.
We will show that to you, and we can show that to you. And make no mistake about it, they're not cuts we want to take. They're not cuts that we would like to take. And we do need to move faster in terms of some of the technological improvements we need to put in stations to make up for the lack of a presence. But and that's not to say that a token booth clerk or a station clerk will not provide some benefit in the station. I will never go that far. However, there are systems that are built to this day that don't have that. They have roving agents within the stations. They have other means available to them. And even in our fare evasion rate, when you compare it to other systems that we have benchmarks, they're far below. There isn't a system in the world that doesn't have some level of fare evasion. And it is an issue of what you spend to try to collect that fare evasion and get the number down. But I won't sit here and tell you that it's a cut that we wanted to take and we strongly endorse. It's the financial economics of the times. We're going to come forward in a few months. I mean, right now we're talking about service cuts. There's going to be layoffs coming. There are going to be programmatic budget cuts for the coming year to generate savings for this year. One of the reasons Carmen Bianco is here and Steve Field has been, I've asked Steve in the prior role that he had that now Carmen's in, he is basically looking at the maintenance area. I am not going to be part of an organization that cuts into the bone to the extent that we suffer on the maintenance side of the house. And yet there are dollar levels we have to reach that will get us very close to that edge. So none of these cuts are being taken lightly. They are being taken with an awful lot of wringing of the hands, gnashing of the teeth. And much like the chairman came, I never expected to come back from Vancouver and deal with this, but it is what it is, and we have to deal with it. And these cuts, as painful as they are, do need to be taken.
Jim?
Well, I can tell you that these service cuts are the worst service cuts experience that I've experienced here, and I've been here 17 years. But in all the other years, we've always had the availability of going with our tin cup to Albany and getting more money. Well, they haven't got enough money to take care of themselves now, so we're on our own, and that's what changes this whole process. And as in light of all the service cuts we're going through, I have to say that the chairman is really, I mean, he isn't doing this lightly either. This is a concern to him, but he's trying to wade through and find out what's fair and equitable and what's going to get us through this year. Because as Tom says, this is the beginning. We've got another $400 million to look at coming. So but we're doing the best we can here, and I agree with all the things that we've talked about, but they can't be done overnight. And, we've been given a very short time frame to cut $800 million out of a budget. This doesn't, we can't do this at the, snap of a finger. So I think everything's on the table, but I think we have to go through it slowly, and we'll come up with the ones that we think are the best. Not any of them being the best, the one that has the least effect on people.
Any other comments? Okay, is that it for? Okay. All right, we will close the agenda for transit and move over to bus. Thank you. Any public speakers for bus? Minutes?
Approved it.
All in favor? Okay, and no changes to the work plan.
Okay, in January, our overall service performance was solid, both AM and PM. We had 99% pullouts for both AM and PM. Completed trips were above 99% for January and slightly below 99% for the previous 12 months. MDBF was 35.95 in January. It was down slightly from January 2009. Safety performance for the 12-month ending in January was somewhat mixed. It improved over the previous 12 months with the exception of employee accidents. The customer accident rate improved by 19.6%. The customer accident injury rate also improved by 15.3%. Bus collision rate improved by 14.3%. And bus collision injury rate also improved by 18.6%. However, lost time accidents, employee lost time accidents, rose by 55%. We expect this area to significantly improve in 2010 as we roll out our restricted duty work option for injured employees. It's a similar practice that's in place at New York City Transit. And for the month of January, we see a 19.6% improvement for the monthly rate as compared to the 12-month average. Total ridership for January was slightly down from January 2009 because of the harsher winter weather. The 12-month ridership level declined slightly by 1% also. In the average weekday ridership remained flat for the month of January. The 12-month period showed a decrease of 1.1%, and weekend ridership showed a decrease for the month of January of 2.5%, but an overall increase for the 12-month period. Our January financial statement, farebox revenue was $12.5 million, which is 0.4% better than the budget levels, the adopted budget levels. Non-reimbursable expenses before non-cash adjustments were $5.7 million, or 13.8% better than the adopted budget. And this is primarily because of personnel savings from vacant positions and timing-related adjustments for insurance claims and material and supply costs. We have no procurement or information items for the committee. However, we do have one action item for the committee this month. We are asking, today we're being asked to approve the amendments to our committee charter to reflect the changes in the committee structure that will take effect in April. These charter amendments will allow different committees to pick up specific pieces of the oversight formerly exercised by the capital construction, planning, and real estate committees. This means that the Finance Committee will now have oversight over real estate matters, and the Operating Committee will now have oversight of capital projects previously handled by MTA Capital Construction for that operating entity. Also, at the full board, the board will approve. We'll be asking the board to approve the delegation of authority to the newly formed Bus Committee, and will adopt a charter for that committee. Therefore, I'm requesting the committee's approval to adopt a resolution with your suggested corrections, of course. And to the staff summary, requesting a charter for new Bus Committee and related amendments to the Finance, Transit, Long Island, and Metro North Committee charters.
Is the motion? Yes.
Because New York City Transit subway and New York City Transit bus are so tightly intertwined in a lot of ways, I hope that every effort is being made to schedule the Bus Committee right before or right after the Transit Committee.
It will be. It will be. Right before, I believe it's going to be in the future.
And it's my understanding and hope that a lot of the current actors on this committee will be on the bus committee as well.
Okay, I've also asked Norm Silverman to come up and talk about some of the modifications we made to the MTA bus proposed changes for the 2010 budget. Norm was also at the hearings, and we listened with what people were saying to us. One of the things, 4 of our 5 changes, Andrew, are express related. One is not, but we have we listened to some of the public comments, and we did make a change to the BMX 7B. Go ahead, Norm. I listened to all of them. Thank you.
And it didn't hurt that Norm was wearing Kevlar.
I put in that rec before the budget problem. Yeah, we made one change at MTA Bus. Basically, as Joe indicated, the BXM 7B, a part-time service to and from City Island, one of the suggestions we received in the outreach process was rather than discontinue it and do nothing, discontinue it, but extend service on the BXM 7A, which currently terminates in Pelham Bay. We're doing exactly that. We're going to extend the same volume of service, 2 round trips a day, to City Island that they currently have. It'll add a little running time, but the consumers of City Island will still have a peak period express bus, as well as the regular New York City Transit 29 bus that connects with Pelham Bay Station for the 7A and the 6.
Those Bronx comments by the public speakers were especially responsible and especially helpful, and it's really quite remarkable how well you adopted and picked them up, and I think you deserve a lot of credit for that. But the speakers who were there, instead of just yelling and screaming at us, they really had some constructive suggestions to make, which were deeply appreciated.
All you have to do is change the signs from 7B to 7A now, huh?
And do the schedule change, yes. That's correct.
I don't know if anyone knows this, but on the bus side, in 2009, we took a 10%, between a 7.5% and a 10% hit in all 3 companies in 2009. So these cuts, on top of all the cuts, these cuts were in administrative and managerial positions, and these next rounds of cuts are really cutting to the bone, especially when it comes to buses. Buses have taken the major brunt of all the cuts here, unfortunately, and yes, that's true. Yes, remember that. I remember that statement. So, but we will do the best. We will try to make these cuts affect people as least amount as possible, and some cuts on the TA bus side affect MTA bus because the ridership now goes over to an MTA bus route and vice versa. So we've tried to look at every opportunity we could, and we've extended service in other areas where we expect people that will jump over and take another leg. So we've tried to foresee, like your comments before, we tried to foresee where the people are going to go to, and we're going to be watching that.
Joe, let me ask you a question. As far as some of the cuts that you're talking about, is it impacting any of the municipal hospitals where people are now have no way of getting to the hospitals? For example, Pelham Parkway goes past Jacoby Hospital. All right. Is there any impact on the municipal hospitals in the city of New York that is going to be affected by these cuts?
No, in fact, that's what we mentioned on the transit side. The Wyckoff Hospital was pointed out, even though it has bus service there, that bus service wasn't going to an accessible subway station if we'd made the cuts as originally proposed. So we're retaining that link from Wyckoff Hospital to, I don't know if it's a municipal hospital or not, but it's a hospital to an accessible subway station. Also, Seaview Hospital in Staten Island, that was a big issue last time where on weekends, we're going to eliminate both buses. This round proposed keeping one of the 2 bus routes over the weekend there.
Okay. All right, that concludes my remarks. No procurement stuff.
Joe, thank you. I've enjoyed every minute of the past 2 years of working with you. You will be in very good and caring hands with Commissioner Chevelle, and you will be seeing a great many of us next month. So thank you and the entire team. It really is a pleasure working with this level of professionalism at the agency. Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
Motion to adjourn? We are adjourned.